Visualizing vectors in geometry nodes has always been a little bit confusing to me, and I've never really understood what these colors mean too well. Well, technically I understand that the red means it's going in the X direction and, etc., but I don't really get much from this picture rather than just a big confusing blob. And especially because a lot of the values go negative, they're not even shown, they're just clipped to black. So yeah, this picture isn't very useful to you if you're working and you're trying to debug a vector field. So I've made this magical node that allows you to visualize the vectors as lines on every single point of the input geometry. And you can see that this provides you with a bit more information about what's going on. And I think it could be a nice learning tool or a good debugging tool as well. And you'll see that obviously nothing gets clipped, all the negative values just point, in the negative direction. And the length of the line determines the strength of the vector field. And I think this is a pretty useful way of doing it. I've seen Houdini tutorials use this kind of visualization before, so I thought I'd make a little something for Blender so that it could be more intuitive to visualize more complex things like velocity and various other attributes. Now obviously everything in geometry nodes is a field, so you input a vector field onto a context geometry and then the vectors are displayed on the context geometry. So obviously this depends what you input here. If I input like a different kind of mesh, then I'm going to get a different result, even though it's the same input vector field. But yeah, this is the basics of it, and obviously this could be used to pretty much visualize any kind of vector you have, but I wouldn't recommend plugging in like an insane amount of geometry into here because every single point gets converted into a line, which is something I might change in the future. Maybe it can be a probability or something, but for now that's how it is, so I'm going to just not plug too much geometry into it. And I've got a few examples of stuff going on here. A visualization of a cross product, which is, I would say, one of the more complicated nodes to get your head around if you're not familiar with vector math before. So I have two basic planes in this example, and I'm sampling the normal of both of these, and I'm cross producting them. So by default, you just get this like green output, and you can imagine if you had like a lot of these vectors, you just have a bunch of different colors and it wouldn't really make too much sense. So instead we can visualize them as lines. So if I visualize the input to the cross product, it's just this vector pointing straight up, and then the second input is this vector pointing this way, and then cross producting them together gives us a vector that points 90 degrees to both of them, and that's pretty cool. So as I rotate this, like it will always point 90 degrees to them, and it will point in a particular direction, but yeah, don't worry too much about it. You can learn more about specific operations using this node. And I've got another example here, which is something that I do all the time. I did it in my camera culling tutorial, and this is about having vectors that point from one thing to another. So you can see I have a grid, and I want a vector from each grid point pointing towards this point. You could imagine like in the camera culling video, this would be the camera, and all these points would be the instances. So this gives you a pretty good idea of exactly how this subtract, gives you this vector that points towards it, and what inverting it does. It makes it point in exactly the opposite direction. And I've added this scale parameter on the node, which just scales the input vector. And the reason for this is just so you can have a play with it to, help you debug or figure out what's going on. So if I scale this by -1, you can see it gives us the same result as inverting this subtract node. So that's a pretty interesting thing as well. And yeah, I just think in general this could be used to help you learn and debug various complex setups involving like lots of vector math. So yeah, hopefully you find some use for this and it helps you out a little bit inside of geometry nodes and makes vectors a little bit less daunting to get into as well. So I've put this available for free in the description if you want to grab it and start playing around with this file and various different vectors in here. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.